The lights came up on Jimmy Kimmel Live, and the crowd erupted in applause. The music was loud, the cameras were rolling, and everything looked just like any other night. But something felt different the moment Brad Pitt stepped onto the stage. He smiled for the audience, gave Jimmy a brief handshake, and sat down. On the surface, it was normal. But the energy between them wasn't. Brad didn't flash his usual charm. He looked calm, but serious, like a man carrying a storm behind. His eyes. Jimmy started as usual, light and funny. "You still breaking hearts, Brad? Or just countries now with this new movie?" The audience laughed. Brad chuckled politely, but his eyes didn't. Jimmy continued, "So this film of yours, what do we call it? A thriller? A mystery? Or a 2-hour conspiracy fantasy?" The crowd laughed again, but Brad didn't. He looked straight at Jimmy and said, "It's based on classified documents." For a second, silence. Even the band fell quiet. Jimmy blinked, unsure if Brad was joking. Then he laughed nervously. "Right? Okay, so you're saying the script came straight from a CIA file?" Brad leaned back in his chair. "Not a script. Testimony." A hush moved through the audience. People exchanged glances. Jimmy's smile faltered just a bit. He checked his cue cards. "Let's talk about the cast," he offered quickly. "You've got some big names." But Brad wasn't following the plan. He said, "You know, Jimmy, we talk about fiction like it's safe. But fiction based on real cover-ups, real surveillance, real consequences, it's not fiction anymore." The producer, watching from backstage, leaned toward the control room director and whispered, "Is he going off script?" On stage, Jimmy shifted in his seat. He tried to steer things back. "Well, you've never been one to shy away from complex stories, but, it's just a movie. People don't come to this show to talk classified files, right?" Brad looked at the audience. Maybe they should. There was a strange kind of tension in the room now. It's the kind that settles in just before something breaks. Jimmy laughed, trying to shake it off. "So, what are you saying, Brad?" "The government's watching us." Brad didn't laugh. "They are." Another beat of silence. A few people in the audience gave unsure chuckles, unsure if this was part of the show. Jimmy raised his eyebrows. "'Kay, now I feel like I need a tinfoil hat." Brad's tone stayed cool. "You should ask your network sponsors about what they know. Some of them helped write the story." There it was, the line no one expected. Backstage, the energy changed. The stage manager looked at the teleprompter. "Didn't say anything about this." Jimmy looked off stage as if waiting for someone to cut to commercial, but no one did. "Look," he said carefully, "you're a respected actor. But this is sounding a bit dramatic, even for Hollywood." Brad turned to Ward. The camera, dramatic. "You think people being tracked, silenced, and ruined for telling the truth is just drama?" The audience was no longer laughing. Brad leaned forward slightly. His voice wasn't angry, it was calm, clear, and slow. "I didn't come here to sell a movie. I came because some truths don't need permission to be told." He stood up. Jimmy looked shocked, and in that moment, everyone knew the interview they had planned was over. And the real one had just begun. The stage lights stayed bright, but the mood had darkened. Jimmy Kimmel sat frozen for a second, caught between his role as entertainer and the storm that had just rolled in with Brad Pitt. Brad didn't wait for permission. He stepped off the stage mid-segment, past the cameras, ignoring the whispers in his earpiece. Backstage, the crew scrambled. The director motioned to cut to commercial, but the feed stayed live for a few extra seconds, just long enough for millions of viewers to see. Brad disappeared behind the curtain. Jimmy turned to the camera, trying to regain control. Well, be right back," he said with a strained smile. The screen faded to black. Behind the scenes, tension crackled like electricity. Brad stood near the dressing rooms, his jaw tight, pacing. A young assistant approached hesitantly. "Mr. Pitt, should we cancel the press photos?" He didn't answer right away. Then he turned and said, "Keep them, but don't expect a smile." Inside the control room, producers were in panic mode. Phones rang nonstop. One executive's voice pierced the chaos. What the hell was that? Is he leaking something? Was that planned? The social media team was already tracking the explosion online. Clips of Brad's statement were going viral. The words classified documents and network sponsors were trending within minutes. One producer leaned over his screen and muttered, "He just cracked something open." Meanwhile, in his private dressing room, Brad pulled out his phone. Dozens of missed calls. A text from an encrypted contact flashed on screen. "They'll push back. You need to leave the city tonight." Brad stared at it. His face gave nothing away. There was a knock. It was Dana Riles, respected investigative journalist from a news channel that had recently been under fire for killing a national security. "Story?" She looked uneasy. "Brad," she said, stepping inside and shutting the door behind her. "You really did it." He nodded. "I told you I would." Dana sat across from him. "You realize what's about to happen, right? The network's going to frame this as a meltdown. They'll say you lost control. The agency's watching. They won't let this go quiet." Brad leaned forward. "Let them talk. The story's real. You've seen the files." Dana's eyes narrowed. "Yeah, and I've also seen what happens to people who talk too loud." Brad didn't blink. "That's why I came here." At that moment, the door opened again. A man in a dark gray suit entered uninvited. No press badge. No studio credentials. His smile was thin, polite. "Mr. Pitt," he said smoothly, "I work with one of the network's external security advisors. We just want to ensure your safety while you're in Los Angeles." Brad stood. "You're not here about safety." The man smiled wider. "You're not wrong." Dana stepped between them. "You can't be here. This is a private room." "Not staying," the man replied. "Just passing along a message." He handed Brad a small envelope. No name, just a red wax seal. "Don't open it here," the man said. Then he was gone. Dana looked at Brad uneasy. "This isn't just a movie anymore, is it?" Brad looked at the envelope, weighing something in his mind. Then he said quietly, "It never was." Outside, a storm had begun to fall over Los Angeles, and inside the studio, something far more dangerous was already in motion. The rain had begun to fall harder as Brad Pitt slipped out of the studio's side entrance, flanked by two assistants and a silent security detail that now looked more confused than protective. Flashbulbs burst from the edges of the alleyway. Paparazzi shouting his name, hoping to catch a glimpse or quote. But Brad didn't look up. Kept walking, coat collar turned against the wind, envelope in hand, jaw set like stone. Back in the studio, Jimmy Kimmel returned from commercial with a plastic smile and forced charm. "Well, folks, sometimes the movies write themselves," he said, trying to diffuse the situation. But everyone could sense the shift. The audience clapped nervously. The show was no longer about laughs. Meanwhile, Dana Riles sat alone in Brad's dressing room. She stared at the door for a moment, then pulled out her phone and called her source in D.C. "Did you see that?" she asked quietly. "Yeah," the voice replied. "We told him to stay quiet." Dana's eyes narrowed. "He won't. And you know it." The voice on the line hesitated. "Then you both better watch your backs." Brad's car turned onto Sunset Boulevard, his phone buzzing again. Another message from the encrypted number. "The envelope is the key. Don't open it until you're off-grid." Brad clenched his fist, holding the envelope tighter. His driver glanced at him in the mirror. "Where to, sir?" "It's Brad," replied, "Keep moving. No highways." At a stoplight, Brad finally opened the glove compartment and pulled out a burner phone. He dialed a number he hadn't used in 5 years. It rang only once. "Hello," a voice answered. Calm, steady British accent. "It's me," Brad said. "It's happening." A pause. "You're sure? They sent someone? Left a sealed envelope?" The voice on the line exhaled. Then we have 48 hours, maybe less. Where are you? Already en route to Geneva. You. Brad looked out the window. LA, but not for long. Don't go dark without dropping the coordinates. I won't, Brad said. Then he hung up. The car slowed near a nondescript building in Silver Lake. It was a storage facility closed to the public at this hour. Brad stepped out, walked inside through a side gate only he knew existed, and entered a private unit lined with old files, a satellite phone, and a locked briefcase. He opened the case and placed the envelope next to a black USB stick. For a moment, he stood there, breathing deeply, surrounded by silence and cold air. The envelope had no markings besides the wax seal of Phoenix rising out of fire. He broke it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No header, no names. Just 3 lines typed in black ink. They know about Project Halcyon. The leak wasn't. Anonymous. You were never off their list. Brad's hand didn't shake, but his heart slammed like a hammer. Halcyon, a word he hadn't heard since his last meeting with Gabriel. Lenexa, former MI6 operative who had disappeared 3 years earlier under suspicious circumstances. Halcyon wasn't just a leak. It was a deep state operation buried under layers of corporate government partnerships. A surveillance network designed to override international privacy laws under the guise of national security. It wasn't legal, it wasn't sanctioned. And it was very, very real. And now, somehow, his name was tied to it. Back at the studio, Dana's phone buzzed again. A private message from unknown. We warned him. Now you're part of it too. She stood immediately. Her hands trembled, but she steadied them with a breath. Brad wasn't just storming off a talk show. He was walking straight into a storm. They had both tried to forget. And this time the world was watching. Brad hadn't slept in 20 hours. The secure safe house in Nevada, where he now found himself, had no windows, no cell signal, and only one way in. It wasn't luxury, it was necessity. On the table before him were 6 items. The letter with the Halcyon warning, the Phoenix stamped, envelope, the USB stick, a burner laptop, a bottle of water, and a loaded 9mm handgun he hadn't touched in years. He stared at the screen. The laptop whirred to life as he inserted the USB. A single folder appeared. Project Halcyon Geneva files. He opened it. Hundreds of documents, maps, communications, intercepts, financial trails. Metadata logs from surveillance programs embedded inside consumer platforms. Names of high-profile leaders and CEOs popped up again and again. Countries listed: US, UK, France, Nigeria, South Korea, and Israel. They weren't just sharing intelligence, they were coordinating psychological operations, public sentiment, manipulation, and targeted censorship. The rabbit hole was deep-hand. It went straight through governments, tech giants, and media houses. One file stood out, labeled Operation K-Glass Media Neutralization Directive. He clicked it. A list of names, journalists, actors, activists, some living, some missing. Some like Gabriel Lennox presumed dead. Brad's name was there, too. But something else chilled him. So was Dana Riles. His hands hovered over the keyboard, frozen. They weren't trying to silence him because of the film. The film was just the spark. They had known from the beginning he would eventually stumble upon something. The script had been based on real leaks, but someone in the writer's room had included details no outsider should have had. It's the only explanation. Someone wanted the truth told, just not by them. The Halcyon leaks weren't accidental. Were bait? Suddenly, the burner phone rang. Brad snatched it up. Speak. Dana's voice was tense, rushed. They followed me. Where are you? I ditched the car in Barstow, took a bus out. I'm using a throwaway, untraceable. Are you safe? Barely. But we have a bigger problem. She paused. Gabriel Lennox is alive. Brad felt his spine stiffen. What? He made contact through a proxy in Zurich. Wants a meeting? Tomorrow night. He has backup documents and says we're already flagged on 3 agency watch lists. Brad stood, pacing. Why now? I surface after all these years. Dana's voice dropped to a whisper. He said Halcyon was never shut down. It was renamed and now it's operational in the U.S. on civilians. Brad didn't speak. Dana continued. He said they're testing a lead sentiment manipulation during live events. Real-time suppression of trending stories. That's why you couldn't go off script on Jimmy's show? They'd flagged your talking points before airtime. Brad remembered the producer's hesitation, the strange pauses in the teleprompter, the delay in Jimmy's ear. They were controlling the narrative as it happened. He clenched his jaw. Geneva it is. I'll meet you at the fallback location. I'll bring the codes, Dana replied, then hung up. The next morning, Brad crossed the border into Utah under a fake name, took a chartered flight under another. By midnight, he touched down in Geneva under his real name. He wanted them to know he was there. It's because this wasn't about hiding anymore. He walked through customs calmly, but every step felt heavier. Across the terminal, Dana stood with a hood pulled low. They didn't hug, just nodded. She handed him a chip drive. Lennox is already here. But we have a complication. What now? There's another leak. Scheduled for release in 48 hours on an independent encrypted platform. It will expose Halcyon and 10 other programs. Brad stared at her, and they think it's us doing it. Dana nodded. Brad exhaled. So we're not just trying to tell the truth. We're trying to survive it. They walked silently into the night, unaware that someone had already taken their picture from across the airport lounge, then uploaded it to a private government server under the tag. Level 5 threat, containment suggested. The Geneva air felt colder than Brad remembered. Every sound, every flickering streetlight made him look over his shoulder. He and Dana moved through the city without speaking, their footsteps echoing on the cobblestones of the old town. They weren't tourists, they were targets. Their destination was discreet. A shuttered bookstore once used as a Cold War dead drop site. Inside, the shelves were dusty but intact. Dana locked the door behind them and pulled down the blackout curtains. A single flickering bulb lit the room. Brad opened the chip Dana had handed him. More files, more evidence. Surveillance logs, financial transfers to shell companies, blueprints for facial recognition programs running silently in social media. Platforms. It confirmed everything Halcyon had hinted at. This is bigger than we thought, Dana said quietly. Brad didn't look away from the screen. No, this is exactly what we feared. They waited. At 2 a.m., the door creaked open. A man in a faded trench coat stepped inside. Gaunt face, sharp eyes, limp in his left leg. Gabriel Lennox. He hadn't been seen in 8 years, officially declared dead in an Istanbul hotel fire. But here he was alive, walking proof that Halcyon's reach didn't always get its kill. You're late, Dana said. I'm alive, he replied. That's harder. He placed a worn briefcase on the table. Inside were hard drives, microfilm, and a single black envelope. This is everything. Final logs before I vanished. Names, assets, kill orders. Brad pulled out one sheet. It was a contract signed. Authorization from an international intelligence coalition to use real-time narrative. Suppression through deep learning behavioral algorithms. Operation name, Project Mirobox. Gabriel tapped the table. They don't just watch people. They reshape them in real time. Watch what you post, what you search, how you pause. They build a version of you, ... And then they decide which version the world should see. Dana's voice was hollow. So we're all fake now. No, Gabriel said. But the parts of us they let survive those are. Brad looked over the list of names. Senators, journalists, executives. Some he'd worked with. One name jumped out. Kimmel, James. He felt a chill. They already have your segment flagged, Gabriel said. They're going to edit it, recut it, and play it as a meltdown. A distraction. The real story will vanish beneath a circus headline. So they discredit me before the leak hits, Brad muttered. Gabriel nodded. That leak you're blamed for it goes live in 36 hours. They'll say you conspired with foreign actors. They'll make you the face of a misinformation campaign. Dana stiffened. And what about us? They'll erase you more quietly, Gabriel said. Brad looked out the darkened window, watching shadows move beyond the glass. Then we hit first. Gabriel raised an eyebrow. We release it all. Brad said, every file, every asset, not to the media. It's to the people. We let them decide what truth is. Gabriel considered it. You sure? No, Brad admitted. But it's better than letting them finish the edit. Suddenly, Dana's phone vibrated. She checked the screen. A single message confirmed. You've been located. 3 words. That was all. They looked at each other. No time left. Brad grabbed the briefcase. We move, now. Outside, the cold wind bit through their jackets. A black van turned onto the street behind them. Then another. No headlights. Gabriel cursed. They're not waiting for the spin. They're moving to silence. Brad glanced at Dana. We're out of safe houses, aren't we? One left. She replied, but it's not in Switzerland. Brad's voice was low. Then we burn the rest on the way out. As they sprinted into the night, Brad knew this wasn't about exposure anymore. It was about survival. And somewhere deep inside, a darker truth settled in. The truth didn't set you free anymore. It got you hunted. A snowstorm hit as they crossed into Slovenia. It was unplanned, both the storm and the country, but it bought them time. The Halcyon agents were still tracking them, but in the Balkans, things moved differently. Information didn't flow in clean channels. Surveillance had gaps. For a moment, they could breathe. Brad, Dana, and Gabriel took shelter in an abandoned radio station near the outskirts of Ljubljana. It had once been used to broadcast anti-Soviet messages. During the Cold War, now it would be their signal tower again only. This time, the message wasn't freedom. It was warning. Dana worked silently, fingers flying over the laptop as she set up an encrypted peer-to-peer network. No centralized servers, no kill switch. We're going live in 12 hours, she said. Once it starts, it can't be. Stopped. Gabriel was pacing. Once it starts, we can't be saved. Brad stood by a shattered window, watching the snow turn the road white. I'm not looking to be saved. He hadn't slept in 2 days. Not really. He was running on caffeine and adrenaline. But more than that, he was running on rage. Not the loud kind, the quiet kind. The kind that stays just under your ribs, cold and alive. The files they carried were brutal. Halcyon wasn't just monitoring behavior. They were shaping elections, funding proxy wars, even rewriting live broadcast transcripts. Whole populations were being nudged, divided, manipulated. All without a single vote, cast, or bullet fired. It was too large to comprehend, too intimate to ignore. Gabriel approached. There's one last file, he said, sliding over a USB drive. You need to see it. Brad plugged it in. On the screen, surveillance footage. Him talking to his brother 3 years ago. A private conversation on a hiking trail. No phones, no mics, still recorded. They'd captured everything, including the moment Brad had mentioned an old UN case. File classified, tied to a village bombing in Syria that never made the headlines. His brother had died in a car crash 2 months later. Brad froze. It wasn't an accident, was it? He asked. Gabriel didn't answer. Silence was its own confirmation. Dana looked up. They silenced him because of you. It's because of what? You almost remembered. Brad stared at the footage. Then we're not leaking a story anymore. We're lighting the fuse. Outside, headlights flashed in the woods. Movement. Gabriel grabbed his coat. That's them. We have 5 minutes, maybe less. Dana sealed the files. Transmission is queued. All it needs is your voice. Brad looked at the mic in front of him, cracked and perfect. He hit record. My name is Brad Pitt. You know me as an actor, but tonight I'm not playing a role. I'm just a man who has seen too much and stayed quiet too long. Dana gave him a nod from the corner. In the next 10 minutes, you will see what I've seen. Hear what I've heard. These files are not theory. They're fact. Documents, recordings, contracts, proof that what you think is your world is a version someone else created for you. Outside, tires screeched on gravel. He kept going. I was told to sell a film, but I'm done selling anything. No studio owns this story. No corporation will bury it. And no government will clean it up. Gabriel grabbed a rifle from the wall. They're coming. Brad leaned into the mic, finishing with one line. We're not asking you to believe. We're asking you to watch and remember. He hit send. The files launched into the network. Dozens of nodes lit up. Then hundreds, then thousands. Lights outside went out. Dana whispered, "They've cut power." Gabriel opened the back door. Out. Now. They sprinted into the trees as drones buzzed overhead. Bullets tore through the night air behind them. But they didn't stop. The broadcast was out. The world had just seen its reflection in the Halcyon mirror. Nothing would be the same. They ran until their lungs burned. The woods outside Ljubljana were thick and frozen, the kind of darkness that seemed alive, swallowing their footsteps. Behind them, shouts echoed, foreign voices, armed boots crashing through snow, and the mechanical hum of drones sweeping low. Brad, Dana, and Gabriel moved like shadows between trees, guided by instinct and desperation. The files were already out, the moment Brad had pressed send. The Halcyon Project's deepest secrets, the surveillance records. Black budget funding trails, psychological warfare programs had detonated across the open web. They'd used an untraceable cascade system. Every time someone downloaded the data, it spawned 10 more links. It was impossible to stop, too late to silence. But that didn't mean Halcyon wouldn't try. By dawn, #HalcyonLeaked was trending worldwide. News anchors scrambled to explain what millions were watching on their phones and TV's recordings of senators offering favors for silence. Journalists paid to kill stories, even celebrities unknowingly used to sway public opinion. And Brad's voice, clear, measured, unshakable, played over every clip. This is not fiction. It is not theory. It is the truth that's been hiding in plain sight. In a cabin high in the Julian Alps, they finally found shelter. An old friend of Gabriel's, a former MI6 contact who had disappeared years ago, now lived off-grid. He offered them warmth, coffee, and a signal blocker to keep drones away. Brad sat near the window, watching snowfall. His hands trembled not from cold, but from the weight of what they'd unleashed. Dana placed a blanket over his shoulders. You know they'll say you're crazy, right? That you snapped on air? That this was all some PR stunt gone wrong. I know, he said. But the truth doesn't care who believes it first. It waits. Gabriel stood in the corner, phone in hand. Take a look at this. He showed them a live stream. On CNN, 2 senators were being grilled about Halcyon's funding. On BBC, a panel of experts confirmed that the leaked documents matched previously suppressed whistleblower claims. Even Hollywood agents were issuing statements, some admitting they'd been told which talking points to push in interviews. The world was no longer guessing. It was waking up. But the fallout had just begun. At Langley, the CIA director convened an emergency meeting. Who gave Pitt those files? Someone shouted. Why wasn't this contained? In Brussels, the EU Commission announced an urgent inquiry into U.S. tech military partnerships. In Silicon Valley, shareholders pulled billions from defense contractors listed in the leaks. And in Washington, a quiet scramble began, phones smashed, emails wiped, alliances broken. Yet amidst the chaos, something else stirred. People began to ask harder questions. Teachers brought the leak into classrooms. Activists marched not just for causes, but for transparency. Newsrooms, long complicit in protecting the system, faced public pressure to report fully. Something irreversible had begun. 3 days later, Brad Pitt reappeared. Not in a studio, not with a publicist, but on a live stream broadcast from a nameless location. His hair was longer now, face weathered, but his voice was the same. "I didn't leak these files to destroy governments," he said. "I leaked them to remind people that the truth is still ours. We don't get it from politicians, or actors, or algorithms. We build it together." He looked directly into the camera. "I'll disappear after this, maybe for good. That's not what matters. What matters is what you do next. Will you demand answers, or will you scroll past them?" He paused. "You can forget me, but don't forget what we saw." The stream ended. It was the last time Brad Pitt was seen in public. Weeks passed, then months. Some said he'd been taken by Halcyon. Others said he was alive, helping whistleblowers escape across borders. A few claimed he was living under another name, somewhere in Patagonia. No one knew. But on the first anniversary of the leak, a video surfaced. Grainy, shaky, filmed from a cell phone. It showed a village in Nepal where children were learning about digital freedom, data rights, and the Halcyon Papers. Painted on the side of the classroom was a mural of Brad Pitt, not as a celebrity, but as a messenger. No glamour, just truth. Beneath the mural were the words he had spoken before vanishing. "Some truths don't need permission to be told." The world had changed, and he had helped start the fire.